Thank you very much for this invitation today to talk about digital single market and also about innovation. Banks are increasingly turning digital, so we think we also have a place in this debate as a banking sector. As you know, the swift development of new technologies, internet, smartphones, tablets, in less than 10 years, and the challenge of new entrants operating in the digital era and new models adds a new dimension to the changing role of the banking sector, definitely. And of course, technology companies and startups also rapidly expanded their activities in the financial services sector as well. So it's pushing banks also to change their business model. But it's also coming from the customers' expectations. The change is definitely ongoing also to provide more solutions to the customers and more tailor-made approaches, products and services. That means that it's also preserving also the values of the banks at some point linked to security aspect, but also privacy also and strengthening trust, which is the most important aspect for the banking sector when providing products and services in this digital age. The tailor-made products, as an example, are, for example, peer-to-peer transfers and also instant payment solutions. It could be also video channels when you are going to your bank and you ask for mortgage credit. Now there are new solutions provided to the customers. And we see very much that innovation is a leading trend as well to provide the best customer experience. That means that we move now to the multi-channel approach to an omni-channel approach. What's its multi-channel approach? It was very much like before, focusing on the different channels like mobiles, ATM, internet. Now it's everything moving together. It's the same channel. So for the banks, it's like strengthening that and avoiding also working as a silos only. So it's very much putting customers at the center. That's the main message. And of course, it's about new branches offered to the customers. So now when you go to your branch in a bank, you will have access to tablets and directly to the product and services. And of course, in the back, the advisors who can provide you with specific advice on your mortgage when it's needed. But it's also about partnership with fintech companies, because of course banking sector is perceived at some point as defensive when we are talking about digital single market, but it's very much about cooperation as well to make sure that we combine all the expertise. The banks have the infrastructure, and some fintech companies and startups companies have innovative ideas, of course, but also they can work together. So banks are very much investing in that, in the partnerships as well with fintech companies. So digital banking is a strategic priority. So we are very glad that the digital single market is like now moving in the direction also to facilitate the access to product and services for consumers, to ensure more security. But that's true that in the digital single market strategy for the moment, the banking sector is even not mentioned. There's only a reference to cybersecurity, but cybersecurity is key, of course, but that's not the only aspect. And what is very important is also to understand the approach of the banking sector towards the digital approach in general. New digital players have, of course, maybe focusing more on monetizing the data that they collect, when for banks, they are more aiming at pricing the products they propose. So we have seen some examples, some companies like disrupting, of course, the market, but they didn't put so much investment in the regulatory implications that force the regulatory players to change also the way, offering more innovation maybe. But the banks are acting differently. They think about like the compliance aspects, the regulatory framework to before launching their projects. And it could be some limits also to launch and to put all the resources in innovation. So it's very important to find the right balance also in the regulatory aspects, and to avoid limiting the innovation ambition of the banking sector and also any companies. We believe that banks are very much well placed to also face those challenges, but also the opportunities offered by the digital single market. And we welcome the digital single market. But of course, we believe there are 4 points should be taken into account. The banking sector should become a strategic partner, of course, because they contribute to the economy, but they could have also a role for digital inclusion, something which is even not so much tackled in the debate. And I think Mr. Weidenhauser stressed this aspect as well. It's digital inclusion, it's important. It's not about like making only people digital, but also helping them to become digital as well. And some banks, for example, have put some expertise to help not only customers, but all the consumers to access and to facilitate the access to products. So helping them to understand the data protection rules and also what does it mean to have access to online products. The other point, it's about also finding a holistic approach. It has been mentioned also that the digital innovation revolution should be adapted, should be considered when we are drafting regulation or even elaborating, even discussing about existing legislation. So this is important, in our opinion, to work with the EU institutions, so it should be public and private partnerships to find also the way to find a fitness check for the existing and forthcoming legislation, because it's important that the legislation existing and forthcoming will be adapted to the digital era. We have seen sometimes there are like some contradiction, especially for the financial services sector. The example is e-signature on anti-money laundering. We have very strict rules to respect, to comply to anti-money laundering regulation. But at the same time, we see in the current directive which has been adopted, there's a open door to e-signature, but it's still considered as higher risk if you don't have a face-to-face relationship with your customer. That means that the customer have to go to the branch. Of course, there are solutions discussed, but in the regulation or directives, there's still some inconsistencies. It's also important to find the right balance between consumer protection, trust, security, and competition. It's important indeed that to avoid considering consumer protection, trust, and security as the opposite to innovation and competition. They can go together. And the other point is about strengthening cooperation and raising awareness of EU citizens in the growing threats from cybercrimes. So cybersecurity is also an essential component. And that's the points we believe are very important to strengthen trust, to create a competitive, innovative market with fair rules, to boost economic growth and employment, which are the objective of a digital single market, in our views.